I'd like to do today is go through that field list that Lyle provided for us. And what I want to start with are the tables that you came up with. Remember I said while you're going through the list of fields, you could find the multi-part fields split apart. If you feel like there's some fields missing, feel free to stick them in there. But fields don't really come into the picture too much for me until a little bit later. But what should also have happened while you were developing those fields is that you start recognizing tables. Now, let me pause the recording for about 3 minutes so that you can review, and if you didn't generate a list of tables, you can quickly go through and say, what are the major groupings here? What tables do I see? He gave us fields. How would you group those into tables? Give you about 3 minutes to do that. All right, before we get into these tables, let's go through the details of step one. I've got both my 10 steps. This is for me to help me remember the steps in the order that I like to do them, and for you. The details for each one of these steps is then in those notes. In those notes, what we're doing in fact finding is finding out all the fields whose data we want to capture for this database. In this case, he gave us about a half a page. Lyle gave us a half a page of notes or of fields. Preliminary field list is what Hernandez would call it. And then we've been kind of working on I don't know about finalizing it, if that's the right word, right? But modifying it, customizing it, changing it so that we know, or we're working toward that final field list. So where do we get these? Normally we get them from the owner. In this case, it's Lyle or me, depending on our perspective. There might be some existing databases. Typically, there are lots of forms that people fill out. At Lions Camp, they had a 6-page form that you got to fill out to get to camp. Yeah, that makes for a nice field list, right? But you can look at that form and say, if they're asking for it on a piece of paper, they're probably going to want to store that information when they're done. So that's where you can get some of that field information. And you can also look at the reports. If they put out a monthly report, an annual report, something like that, and have the same effect there. You can look at the results and say they need this, and they need this, and they need this, and they need this. If they generate mailing lists, we need this information, we need that information. So the data from existing databases, that could be an Excel spreadsheet, could be an Access database, who knows? So those are a bunch of sources where you can get this from, and we also talked about interviews and how much time should those take. That's this current owners here. We're going to have to interview them somehow. But often what I will do in that first interview is say, can you give me a collection of the forms that you have people fill out? Can you give me a collection of the reports that you generate on an annual basis? And then I can start from that. But that may not be all encompassing. When you're doing this fact finding, you don't have to worry about grouping them. You can just simply list them. But what often happens to me when I'm listing them, going, oh, that's a table, oh, that's a table, oh, that's a table. And I don't see any big reason to say, no, don't make a list of tables, but you might make them in different columns. This is what I did. Put them into different columns and say, here's my list, because that's important. And then over here are my tables. That's going to help me in step 2. So you can kind of blend these 2 steps together, but we're not quite ready yet. All right, so you don't have to worry about grouping them. And if you find any multi-part fields like name, split it. Typically address, city, state, zip, those are pretty well split in most cases. And I've already mentioned that phone and area code, that's getting a little dated. However, if there's an extension available for a phone number, I don't include that in the phone field. That goes into a separate place. So that's step 1, the fact finding. It's kind of what we did. We got a list from Lyle, and now you've gone through that and looked for holes if there are any, found the multi-part fields. We're going to worry about those fields a little bit later, because the next step is to name the tables. Okay. And this is where I start plowing into Visio. I like to use Visio for my entity relationship diagrams, because ultimately that's where we're going. We're going to be building an entity relationship diagram. So I can start using Visio right now. Somebody was asking me, do you really like Visio? Honestly, if I weren't recording, I'd be up there on the whiteboard drawing these tables, this initial entity relationship diagram. I got a bunch of pictures on my iPad of whiteboards because our whiteboards don't save. Okay. So I got a bunch of pictures of whiteboards with entity relationship diagrams on them because it's much easier to erase over there. Plus, I like getting high on the markers, so that works really well. Keeps me focused. All right, so when we're naming these tables, what are we doing? We usually come up with some naming conventions. The convention we're going to use here applies to programming logic as well. Kind of tie the two together. In my systems implementation class, the students in that class said, can we get rid of the prefixes on the tables? And they agreed, I agreed, that was our naming standard. In this class for right now, I want to make sure that we're all straight, that we're naming tables here, so we're going to put a prefix on it. Does that mean I put prefixes on all my fields too? No. But I do on my tables, I do on my queries, we will in programming logic as well. So when we name our tables, we're going to stick a TBL prefix at the beginning. When you name your table, use either a plural noun or a singular noun. I'm leaning more toward plural nowadays. Just be consistent. Right. So TBL customers, TBL locations, TBL vehicles. Here's the singular version of that. Doesn't matter, it's a name of a table. But nowadays when I look at a table, what's inside that table is a bunch of customers, not one. And so I tend to put an S on it. If you abbreviate, I'm not abbreviating here, but I wouldn't call it TBL lokes. If you abbreviate, make sure it's clear to everybody. If your owner uses an abbreviation, like PC, I think we all know what that means, right? Politically correct? No, not in this case. In this database, we're talking about personal computers, the PC clinic. As long as everybody's on the same page, abbreviations are okay. And very often you'll be using abbreviations that your owner will introduce you to that maybe you don't understand, but they do. I would start getting comfortable with those abbreviations. I had to learn about medications and all the abbreviations they use for milliliters and milligrams and all this stuff. See how many I remember, that's 2. But I had to learn those. And they also have abbreviations at Lions Camp for the different kinds of disabilities. There are CD campers and VI campers and DHH campers. And those are terms they use all day long because they don't like to say deaf and hard of hearing. It's too long. So those are DHH campers. And I had to learn how to use that terminology, and it shows up in my database. So abbreviations are okay. Use minimal words. Usually it's a singular, or I'm sorry, a plural noun of some kind. I don't get too complicated if I can avoid it. Stay away from the words record and files and table because that's what we're naming here. That's why we're putting a prefix on it to designate it as a table. So we don't have to say employee information. We don't have to say customer records. It's just customers. That's what's in this table. That's the way I think about it. It's kind of like variables. What's inside is what we're describing with the name. Don't include adjectives. Some person had a question on some of these, and again, sneak these questions in like we did in systems, and we do it in here as well. Before, sneak the questions in as I'm talking about them. Why wouldn't I have 2 tables, some for Wisconsin Rapids and some for Stevens Point? Because they're all employees. What's different about employees from Wisconsin Rapids and Stevens Point? Just the campus. Now, if there were other significant differences, then I might go that route, but I do it a little bit differently. That's advanced, a little more than I want to get into in this class. So Miguel, that was your question, if I remember right. How do I, if I don't want to do that, how do I fix it? How do I keep track of what campus they're on? As a field. Maybe, unless you work on multiple campuses, then it becomes a table. It's a separate table, a campus assignment or something like that. So let's give it a shot here. A little background on Visio in case you decide to follow along. I made a couple of new connectors here. In Visio, when you make the connections, they automatically get arrows at the end, and we have to take those off because we don't want arrows. I don't want arrows. Okay. I'll show you a flowchart here, or an entity relationship diagram that my systems implementation class built, and it uses what are called crow's feet. You want many, you get this little three-pronged thing at the end of the line. That means many. You want one, you get this little vertical bar at the end of the line, and that means one. Okay, those work. I prefer a little different technique, so I'm going to show you that instead. And so what I did to get away from those, the default connectors here all have lines on them, and Visio isn't smart enough to remember that, hey, the last time he drew a line, he took the end off. He probably wants the end off of this one. Not that smart. So what I did is created a couple of connectors. This is a connector with no connection, no arrows. I should say no arrows instead of no connector. Probably be a better name. Let's rename that, see if it lets me. Be right with you. No, I think I have to edit it first. Come on, open. Thank you. And then this one is no arrow, but it doesn't do the right angle thing. It allows me to draw diagonal lines. Every now and then I want those. I'm not sure I'm going to use this one a whole lot because that's real easy to change. And I don't change it all the time, just every now and then, but I made one anyways. No arrows straight. And now Joni's question might be, how did you make that? Well, first of all, I looked it up on the web because I didn't know how to do it. And what they said is go to more shapes, go to my shapes, and open up favorites. And here's my favorites. It's open already. Then we do what I just did and right click it and edit the stencil, meaning I want to add new shapes to my stencil. Then I drew that shape on the board and I customized it, took the lines off and all that stuff. So how did I take the lines off? Let's just look at that real quick. Put a box on here, and then I can, on a Mac, I control dragged it. On a Mac, you need to add the option key as well. And then I went to the connector and I connected these. And if we zoom in, there's an arrow on there again. And I said, I don't want the arrow. So I went back to my pointer tool, selected the line, and then went to the line feature here in the Home tab. I'm going through quick because it's in the recording, and hopefully you'll only have to do this once. And here's the arrows, and there, I don't want them. And if we scroll down here, there's more arrows, not in this flow chart, but usually you can see the crow's feet here, but I'm not going to use those in this class. I'm going to keep it simple. Hey, I said no arrows. Pay attention. There. Now it's gone. And then all I did to add this to my favorites is I opened the favorites back up again and simply dragged this line from here into there, gave it a name. That's all. If I want to make this a straight line instead of an angle wraparound stuff line, then you simply right click it, please. Pretty please. There we go. And notice here's a straight connector. It's that simple to make it straight. So I'm not sure I need this one necessarily because I can just say straight. Now it's straight, and I can drag that over here, add it to my stencils, and then when you're done, hit the little save guy, and now those on this computer are your favorite stencils. There's probably some relatively convenient way to transfer those to your computer on your laptop, to your computer at home. They're simple enough to do. I'd probably just recreate them on each one. So now I have those special connectors. All right, let's get rid of the stuff here. And I'm also going to change the theme because I don't like these blue boxes. They're hard to read, so I'm just going to go to the empty boxes, maybe with some shadows on them or something. And now I need a box. And now that I have one box, and I'm still having issues trying to figure out how do I get to my basic shapes and my favorites at the same time. What would probably be wise for me, ooh, this is a good idea, go back to favorites, and let's make this a favorite. That way I don't have to be bouncing back and forth between templates. So now I have to expand this again and edit it. I was hoping the star would do it. And drag this in here. And this is the name it gives it, master, which is really dumb. So I click on it and change it, and let's just call this an entity because this is going to be part of my entity relationship diagram. If it's yours and you want to call it a table, knock yourself out. Those are two Similar terms. Table is probably used more often, but entity in the diagram, again, is not called a TRD. So now I have those shapes, and I might be adding one or two more yet, we'll see, but now I have my shapes. And somewhere here, oh, when I drag it out of here, it moves it. That's weird. So now I'm ready for one. There we go. So that's all overhead. Now we're ready. Here's how I create the entity relationship diagram. I've gone through my field list, made a preliminary list of tables. By no means final. Who wants to be brave and give me the name of the first table?
Customer.
Oh, but you're all brave. Let's raise our hands. I can pick on you more. Kathy? Customers. Bad name. Fix it.
Customer.
Nope. What? Okay. TBL customer. You said table. Right? Customers.
I just said T really fast.
Yeah, that's just TBL really fast. Sounded like table. Good. Is that a table? If it's not, I will argue with you. I agree. That's a table. Lyle?
Are we camel casing our tables?
I do. I just makes things easier to read for Kathy's benefit. What I mean by camel case is the prefix is all lowercase. Every word from then on is capitalized, but only the first letter. If we have an abbreviation in our name, like PC, I capitalize the P, but not the C. Next brave person. Raise your hand, tell me a table. What else did you see in there? Lyle?
Technician.
Pardon me?
Technician.
Technician. What's the name of the table?
TBL.
Say again.
TBL technician.
Like that? Now we're inconsistent.
Technician.
Well, I said.
Sorry, couldn't hear you. I'm sure you did say that. Consistency is the key. Why does it matter? Because when you start writing code against these tables, if you have to remember which ones are plural and which ones are singular, you're going insane. And this is a rough enough job as it is. Make your life easy. Be consistent. Give me another one. Devices? Who said that? I heard voices from Joni. What do you mean by devices?
Well, whether they bring tablet, laptop, or computer.
Okay. The only other thing that's on that list, and that's why I'm curious about devices, is printers, right? Do you fix printers in there? In my case, I bring them in, they try, and then they throw them away. That's what's happened to me when I brought my printer in. So devices isn't bad. It actually, you know what? Let's put that in here. Val, you want to chime in?
TBL work orders.
Okay, that's a new one, so let me put devices in here. Notice I'm not connecting them. I'm just making it, this is my list of tables. Why put it on the, in my notes it says create a list. Well, if you're doing it at the same time, okay, I have this nice columnar thing here, but I don't need to show that piece of paper with my list to my user and say, is this all your tables? This is probably going to be easier for them to read and understand, particularly if I don't do a whole lot of connecting just yet. That was TBL work orders. What else?
TBL payments.
I'm sorry.
TBL payments.
Payments. Maybe. I'm not sure about that one, but I can see it as a potential. Kathy? Anybody else?
Would you do a lookup table for dates?
For
Dates?
no. The question was dates in case it. What do you mean by lookup dates? What do you want to look up?
For example, if the date, when I used it in the past, we used it to look up to make sure that the date was actually, that was entered, was actually a working date versus a non-working date, meaning that it's like a business day versus a non-business day. 'Cause
Oh,
you can
yeah,
only
I wouldn't
log
do
into
that
business
here. No.
days.
No, I wouldn't do that here. I would make that part of my validation, which to the programming logic intermediate class means the validation in the business class, right? That's easy enough to do in Visual Studio. That goes in the front end. See anything else? Karen?
TBL parts.
Parts. If you fix computers, occasionally you got to fix the parts, right? Replace a video card, add some RAM, maybe a motherboard, not likely, but maybe.
What's a motherboard?
I don't know. The opposite of a fatherboard. That's how some of you answer your systems questions. I can answer the same way. Okay, what else we got?
Along those lines, TBL services. Services?
Services. I think I have that. Yep, okay.
Wouldn't that be the same as like work orders though?
No, the work order is, to me, when I think of that work order, when did they bring it in? What did they say is wrong with it?
Just information on what they wanted.
But kind of, yeah. And who is it for? Because that same computer can come back again. Right? And services, at least when I ran the clinic, I'm guessing it's still pretty much the same. When you bring in a computer, you don't even have to ask for it. We're going to open it up. We're going to blow all the dust out of it if we're talking a desktop. Don't usually do that with tablets. I don't think you're fixing tablets yet, are you? Joni, do you know? You're not.
I don't,
But this device, we're talking about the flexibility, right? And this design, if we do it right, should allow us to start fixing tablets and phones if that's what they're going to get into. So, most of what they do is PCs, and half the time when they say fix, it's I got a virus, get it out of there, right? But we used to blow the thing out, dust it off, clean it up a little bit on the inside. It's kind of like going to Scafidi Motors to get your oil changed, and they wash the car for you, even if you didn't ask. Right? So the services might include a virus scan. Even if they don't ask for one, it might be a free service. But we're probably going to want to keep track of what have we done to this computer. So yes. Anything else out there?
TBL problems,
Problems?
whatever they brought it in for.
I think that's a field. Unless they brought it in for lots of problems. I would normally say that it's a field in the work order. You brought this in. What is it you want me to do? Clean off its viruses. Okay. That may be part of it. Or add RAM.
What about solution?
But if it's more than one, then she might be right.
Comment section or something?
Now you said problems, right? But it might not be a problem, right? I want to add RAM. I guess that could be a problem. They don't have enough RAM. That's the problem. Is there a better name for it?
Issues.
Issues?
Diagnosis.
That's more going into what's wrong with it.
Solutions.
Solutions on that. That's not a fix. I don't want to give it the wrong name and get the wrong impression. What's in here is what they want me to do to it. And no, I'm not going to call it TBL what to do to it. Is there a name for that? Requests crossed my mind. I don't think it's a whole lot better than problems.
Issues.
Issues. Problem. Let's go with issues. if you can't come up with a name, the next idea is give it a name. Maybe somewhere on the side, write yourself a little note saying problems, requests, and the next time you talk to your owner, which of those do they prefer? Which term would they use? And if they go, then pick your own. If they have one, the term that they use. And this is, I think it's a very important part that doesn't get covered very well in a lot of our classes. That when you're working for an owner, for a company, for a customer, you need to be able to speak their language. And the closer your program is to their language, the more likely when you maintain it, it's going to make sense. When I talk to Lions Camp, they talk about BAM all the time. And they just added it about 5 years ago. When I first heard it, I said, BAM, what? Okay. And they look at me and go, oh yeah, that's right, we got to train the programmer. It's behavior, attitude, and mobility. It's just an abbreviation they use all the time, and they wanted to add it. Now, I could call it something completely different if I wanted to. But that's the term that they use, so it made it into the program. Anything else?
You need a table of solutions then?
I think I see the services as a solution.
You need something for whether it's hardware or software. And they call them
And that could be part of, that could be a field, it's part of services, maybe.
phone number, table of phone.
Uh,
Funding customers.
the phone number is one of those I still struggle with a little bit. All right. In this database, I don't expect too many people to be sharing phone numbers. And I have seen phone numbers, and Joni's throwing a lot of stuff at me that she got out of systems design. This is Jason stuff by the sounds of it, right? Okay. That was a very complicated database they did in that program. And there's a possibility, and this is one way of doing some of this stuff, is you put all the phone numbers in their own table. Here's a table full of phone numbers. And then you link them back to whoever they belong to. My philosophy is I only do that if I got a whole bunch of phone numbers in 7 different tables. There's a phone number for the technician, and there's a phone number for the person, and there's a phone number for the company, and there's a phone number for, and there's all these different phone numbers. And instead of having a phone number field in 4 different tables, I have a phone number table. And then those other tables link into it and say, that one there, that's my phone number. In this one, I think we're simple enough we can go with 1. We might change our mind on that. Lyle?
A table for the documentation,
Like what?
for like the notes or the documentation, like say I replaced their operating system.
Sounds like services to me. Okay. Again, it could be another table where I keep all the notes, but then the notes have to be tied back to the work order that I was working on, and that's okay. But I think that can be embedded inside here. What service did you provide? I blew out all the dust. Okay, done. I replaced the RAM. Done. We can have multiple services for each work order. And in here, if you wanted to do a description saying, I did the virus scan, and then we might have a comments block where you can put in there that nothing was found or 3 Trojans were found, whatever. I think that's more a field than it is a table. Joni?
Would you put the username and user password under the device table or customer table?
Well, the first question is, do you want security on this?
Yes.
Really? I don't have security on most of my programs. Why not?
So it's on the table?
Pardon me?
So would you put it in its own table?
No, I don't have any security, period.
Pardon?
I don't have any security in my programs at all. Why not? Meaning you don't have to log in to use my attendance tracker. Why not? Louder.
Because you're the only one that has the copy to it,
I'm the only one who knows it's there.
or the access to it.
All right, now it's on the web, so I'm being a little risky here, but you know what? I don't care. Your attendance in this class isn't terribly sensitive information, right? So in that case, I don't care. So the question is, and then there's another reason. I wrote a program for my wife to keep track of the books that she has sold on eBay. It runs on her desktop. There's no security. Why not?
It's the only one that's gonna see it.
The only place it's installed is in her user area, and if you can log in as her, then go ahead. She's the only one using it. So then the next question that before we put security in here, that's an option. I'm not saying no yet. I'm asking my owner. Right. Do we want each technician who's going to use this system to log in? Or anybody walks up in there, anybody who's working in the clinic can log into this thing and put in records and do all kinds of stuff.
Oh, no, I meant the person that brings in the device, their username and password.
To me, that security would be hiding inside the device, probably.
But let's just say two technicians are working on it, one's working on it, and another one finishes the job, they both need to know how to.
Yeah, and it's stored with the device in my database. So they come into the database and it tells them, this is, I crossed this off my list, by the way, but that's fields we're talking about now. The password, the admin password on that device. I disagree with Lyle. That's a bad idea. If it was me in that clinic, what I would say is, okay, we're going to need to log in as an administrator on your computer. I don't want you to share your password with me, so I want you to log in. I will help you. You log in, and I will, as an administrator, and I will create another administrator account, a technician's administrator account. Does that mean we can't go in and wipe out somebody's password? I don't care what's on the form. I do care what's on the form, all right? But that'd be one I would be arguing about. Going, that's my favorite password that's on my desktop. I don't want to give that to you. Well, we can't work on anything until, pardon me?
Can't they just disable it for the time that,
Disable what?
like, the password requests?
We could disable, we could remove the password from the administrator account. We could create a new administrator account. The problem with removing it is it kind of lets me look around. But hey, if I'm an administrator, I can go wipe out somebody's password if I want to go snooping and do stupid stuff. Hey, but you're not going to be a technician in that clinic very long. To me, the wise way, and well, oh, careful, Volker. I'm having second thoughts. If they want software installed, I can't install it as an administrator because it'll probably need to be run again in their local system.
Because it will only be yours.
Otherwise, it might not be accessible to them. Or maybe they only want it installed in their user account, not the other account. So I don't know that we know the answer to this.
So then you get the option of giving them your password or changing.
But now we're talking about fields because I'm going to store it with the device. It's a field, it's not a table. Because there's only going to be one, I think. But do we want the technicians to log in? Two reasons, for security, and the other one is audit. When we're down here and somebody comes into services, we could behind the scenes keep track of who entered that service and who changed it. You could do it behind the scenes, and as long as you're logged in as Lyle, then it gives you the credit for doing the work. If you left it logged in with whoever it was before, maybe Aaron was working on it 2 hours ago, never logged out of our system. So I think that the login information or the user information is also important. Are users and technicians the same thing? That's my next question. What's the difference? Pam's going no. What's the difference?
I had just, in my opinion, a user would be someone using the computer, a technician is someone fixing the computer.
Okay. John?
I was,
Not saying you're right or wrong yet.
does this table like take into account like if one technician can't fix it, if it's sent to another one?
Yeah, because we could do multiple services.
Okay.
Right, and we could have virus scan on one, and that virus scan didn't work, so then we could use a different scanning program or cleaning program. My gut feel here is that technicians log their own work. You know, in Pam's case where she's talking about there's users of the program, and there's technicians who fix the PCs.
Well, wouldn't they
If I'm fixing it, who am I going to get to enter my data? Nobody.
Are we still talking about, when I said username and user password?
No, I'm talking about to log in to use this system now. That other one I put aside for later because it's a field issue.
That should go under technicians, then, right?
That's where I'm leaning toward right now.
Because you shouldn't be able to get in there. Even if you're just the one at the window taking the computer, you shouldn't be able to get into that system without being able to put your username and password so that you're verifying who's taking the computer for it to be tracked later. If that computer comes up missing or a piece of paper.
Do they have anybody that doesn't fix anything, just takes them in? And I don't think so. You work at the clinic, you take in machines and you log them, and then maybe you go fix them, and
But it might not be the same person that works on that takes the.
doesn't matter. That may be one of the services that we provide, is just the input, but I think that's a little bit different. One of the other things we're discovering in the systems implementation class, where we talk about, when we start thinking about how we're going to use this thing, we're in step 2 of a 10-step database design process, and we're not even talking about how the program is going to look and how it's going to be used. That's a little further down the road. Occasionally those discussions come in handy because they bring to light another table that you're missing. But if we do our design well, that table showing up a month from now might not make a lot of difference. The other side of this story in this class is we're not going to implement this thing. We're not going to write. We could. It's a little complicated for programming logic intermediate. Might become a project in a year, or systems implementation could do it. But with this number of tables, and it's not a lot, right, but there's enough, programming logic, you're going to do 2. Once you know how to do 2, then you can expand that to 8 without too much trouble. But we don't have the time for you to write a program that manipulates 8 tables, because for each one of those tables, what do you get? Programming logic intermediate. What comes with it now if we start writing the code? A business class. And typically, a form. So we're talking about 8 business classes and all the logic and all the code for that, plus 8 forms to allow me to enter that kind of data and manipulate it. Not to mention the reports, the printed receipts, the other stuff that's not even a form. We just don't have the time. I think this is a good place to start for our tables. The one thing that's kind of missing here is this guy. And can you see that's devices? A little bit bigger. What I'm thinking is that devices come in different flavors, right? If we have a computer that we need to fix, now we're back to that. What's your admin account name and password? But we don't have that with printers. We might not have that with tablets, laptops, probably. And so what I'm thinking here with devices is this might actually have subtables. You probably read about them briefly. They're hard to come up with sometimes, and I think we've come up with one here accidentally. The information that we store about computers that we fix is different than the information that we store about printers. But they all fall under the category of devices. And so what I think we have here is a couple of more tables. And for our clinic right now, those tables are TBL computers and TBL printers. I don't think they're fixing projectors, monitors. To me, laptops fall under computers, though we might want to reconsider, but I don't know. I think we might be able to sneak those together. It's my gut feel right now. So those are subtables. They further define a device. There are some things about a device, maybe its serial number. Every device has a serial number. right? And so the serial number would go, we're talking fields now, getting ahead of myself again, but the serial number would go in here, not in here. And it's a bizarre relationship. We'll see that after the break.
What about manufacturer? Because I just, for devices, I had the manufacturer, device model number. And
You're talking about fields now. The model number by itself is not a table. Could the manufacturer be a table? It's called either a validation table or a lookup table. Here's a list of manufacturers. What if the manufacturer of the device is not in the database? Then what? Then we have to add them to the manufacturers first before we can describe the computer, because this is a brand new computer manufacturer that was Sanyo maybe. All of a sudden they start making computers. So, you know, that's not bad. Let's go with that. What that means though is the way we're designing this is we're telling our user you cannot have a computer, you cannot have a device unless you first have the manufacturer in the manufacturer's table. The alternative is we don't have a manufacturer's table, and up here we have a manufacturer's field. And how many times is Dell going to show up? How many times is HP going to show up? Dozens, hundreds of times. There's a couple of ways to handle that. Some that are good for database design, others that are not but still work. My favorite technique is my lazy technique is I have manufacturers in here, not S, manufacturer, and I give you a combo box. Here's the ones that are already in the database. HP, Epson, Visio, whatever, right? On and on and on. And if it's not there, you type it. And then the next time we bring that form up, guess what? Now it's in the database and it shows up in your combo box. And so it's kind of this self-filling combo box that grows as your database grows. The risk of doing that, how do you spell Visio? It's got I's and O's and A's in it, right? But in what, ooh, geez, and what happens when you transpose them? Now I got it in there twice. Ruh-roh. But even that can be self-correcting because you go, that's not spelled right. And so for the one record where it's spelled wrong, you fix it, you pick the right one, and then the next time you open the form, the bad one's not there anymore. And so that's an interesting technique. It's not really cool for database design. Pure database design said if you got lots of Dells and lots of Vios and lots of HPs, you should have a manufacturer's table, put them in there once. And then up here, you just link to that.
What do you mean self-correcting?
Self-correcting means that the list, if I put Miguel in there in my database with first name, maybe I have a combo box of first names, right? And I put Miguel in there with a G, and then somebody else puts it in there with a Q. And you look at it and go, Miguel with a Q, really? Whose name? And then you go bring that up, and it's you. And you go, no, it's a G. The way I write my program is it looks in the database and says, give me a list of all the unique first names that are in there. If I fix the spelling of your name from Q to G, there's no more Miguel with a Q in the database. So the next time I come in, the combo box doesn't have the Q in there
You
anymore.
have to select it. It doesn't like automatically go, okay, this is the right one and that's the wrong one.
No, you have to
The
figure out
user-
which one's the wrong one and
user
fix it.
of
But
the
when
thing.
you fix it, the next time you come back to the form,
Yeah.
it has the correct list.
That's just how it works. Basically, the user has to decide, replace this with this.
Yeah, somebody's got to say that's not right.
Yeah.
You just misspelled Hewlett Packard. I'm not sure I could spell that either. HP, that I can spell. All right. So again, I've been talking about it. It's hard to give you one straight answer. Here's the right way to do that. Some are better than others. But from a user's perspective, this can be a little more complicated. But hey, if it's complicated, what do we do? We write code to make it magic, and it automatically just puts it in there. But there's a risk when we automatically put it in there, because if I put it in here and it's wrong, there's 2 HPs in here, there's 2 Vios in here. Now I got a problem. That's a little harder to clean up. The other one is self-correcting. That's what I call it. It's my term. The other one's self-correcting. If I put a bad one in here and I link it to 3 different ones because people keep picking it, even though it's not spelled right, they don't sense it. They assign it to 3 different devices. And then I go, oops, spelled wrong. And the right spelling is already in there? Oh, now it gets a little more complicated. So we'll leave it there for right now. It's a good example. Let's take 10 minutes. When we come back, our next task is to find the relationships between these and try to record it. Take 10.